Hello, everybody. Hi, welcome to another episode of Leadership Link. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Justine Chinoperekweyi. And hello, Dr. Justine. How are you? Welcome. Dr. Justine, let me turn on the, there you go. Here we are.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Welcome to have you here. And well, I'm quickly going to jump into putting all the things that important things that just to know the magnitude of the guest that we have here today, a PhD, a doctor and a specialist in organizational development. As it says here on the bottom is the long list of achievements and current standings of the Dr. Justine. He's the president of Organizational Leadership and Development Network, OLDN. As it says there, he's involved in educating people in over 16 countries in the topic of organizational development. He's a board member of the International Society for Organizational Development and Change, right? And many other things, Doctor. So it is an honor and it's a pleasure to have you here. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now, the topic of today's live stream. By the way, this is being streamed on the Leadership Link YouTube site or YouTube channel, and here on my profile here on LinkedIn. So today's topic is on this book, right? Yeah. And the reason I invited you is because what captured my attention in the title of the book was Transforming Through Choiceless Awareness. That's what caught my eye, right? And first of all, I'd like you just to tell us a little bit about yourself very briefly, and then jump in directly what this book is all about. So go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roberto, for having me. I'm humbled. I'm a small boy from Zimbabwe, Dr. Justine. I'm involved in organization leadership and development as a scholar practitioner. So I do stand at the edge of academia and practice with respect to organization development and corporate governance and leadership development. So that's what I spend most of my time doing. I am an author, and this is the 5th book in my bucket of authorship. And with regards to the book, Conquering the Listening Dilemma, Transforming Through Choiceless Awareness, allow me to start by acknowledging my colleagues who are co-authors of the book, Tosin Ekundayo from Nigeria, and Joshua Mabonga from Zimbabwe, and Andrew Chinoperekweyi from Zimbabwe. So the book seeks to give the pride of place to listening as a fundamental skill in leadership and in social influence. And like you rightfully said, the need to transform through choiceless awareness is at the center of the content that we did put together in that particular book. And first of all, this is as a result of our acknowledgement of the fact that in most leadership and social influence conversation, people do give the pride of place to public speaking and not to listening. And we do submit that public speaking is a fundamental skill in leadership and social influence, but listening is actually more important to speaking. So trying to bring people to the realization and the understanding that listening is a fundamental skill to integrated living, it's a fundamental skill to leadership and social influence, then informed our perspectives with regards to putting that book together. So that will be my introduction to that, to start this conversation.
And so I would have a next direct question on that. So I think right now you've answered the question of what motivated you to write the book, right? A little bit about getting some awareness on the importance of listening in its reach in social influence and leadership. Now, I'm going to put the question up here. What would you like your readers to get out of this book after reading it?
Great. Just to touch on the motivation as well, as you have indicated there, you'd realize that there are a lot of calls among organizational scholars to have listening being regarded or considered as a theoretical concept and not a mere construct. So in most instances, when we are talking about leadership and social influence, we definitely indicate that leaders should be good at listening. And the issue of empathetic listening is quite topical today in leadership and social influence conversation. But we have not given listening the pride of place in organizational literature, though there are a lot of calls that are calling for listening to be considered. So this is another area that we focused on and that inspired us to write the book and to get people to see listening as a theoretical construct and not just a mere construct without much value to organizations. So when we then look at what exactly do we need readers to get out of this book after they read the book, number one is the realization that listening is essential trait in social influence. We need that awakening, because most people have a lot of distractions when it comes to listening. When we engage in a conversation like this, we tend to see listening as a normal activity in day-to-day living. But how do we get people to realize that it is a significant element in social influence? Why? Because it does breed creative impulse within individuals. So when you read the book and probably enhance your listening abilities, you need to then ignite or awaken that creative impulse that comes through listening. Number two is from a leadership dimension. What readers should actually get from this book is enhanced perceptual clarity. And enhanced perceptual clarity comes through real listening, acute listening, intuitive listening. So as people go through the book and the attributes that we identified in this book, we expect an enhanced perceptual clarity and immeasurable intelligence. In listening, there is immeasurable intelligence and enhanced perception. So we expect readers to awaken those listening attributes, and by doing so, sharpen their perceptual clarity, enhance their intelligence, and as such, conquer what we then call the listening dilemma. So if you really listen, it gives a totally new and different perspective. So when we enhance people's perceptual clarity and their creative impulse through listening, then they have a totally different perspective, which is fundamental to then leadership and social influence, as well as to personal and professional development. And we also note that choiceless awareness or transformation through choiceless awareness is affected by attentional loss in most conversations. So how do we help people sustain their attention during conversations? The attributes that we explored in this particular book will help in sustaining that attentional focus. And this is mainly because people lose their attention as a result of internal and external distractions. So the book then helps people to identify some of those internal and external distractions that they need to monitor and enhance internalizing whatever conversation that will be happening there. And the last thing, like I indicated earlier, the readers need to appreciate that listening is a theoretical term and not a mere construct. And as such, we need more people bringing literature around listening so that it gets the pride of place, just the same as public speaking, which is actually overshadowing listening in most conversations. So those are some of the elements that will be fundamental for the readers to pick.
Right. Listening is a theoretical construct, but listening is also a function of the nervous system for the human being. Correct?
Correct, yes.
So it's way beyond a theoretical construct. It's an actual, real, perceptual input feature of mammals and us human beings.
Yes.
As well.
We look at hearing and we look at listening. There is a significant difference between the two. And when you're bringing it as a theoretical concept, it means it is an area of study because listening is so complex. Hearing is not as complex. We can hear the verbal conclusions, we can hear the words, but in listening, it means you actually have to listen to the words not spoken, listen to the many voices of possibilities awaiting to unfold in any conversation. So as we are engaging in this conversation, there are many voices of possibilities that the listener needs to partner with to co-create. And that makes it more complex than hearing. And as such, there is a lot of work that needs to be put in appreciating it as a theoretical concept and an area of study in order to enhance social influence and leadership. Yeah.
I see. So what you're transmitting here is that you're trying to attempting to raise awareness as listening is an important factor and area of study, and what doors it can open to the creative impulse and the co-creation as a human society.
Definitely. And I think you agree with me that if we enhance our capacity to really listen, that acuteness of listening, we nurture that creative impulse, we improve our leadership, we improve in terms of social influence and our intelligence as human beings. So when we take it now as an area of study, as a theoretical term, and we appreciate the complexity that comes with listening and the value that we can derive from listening, then we improve in those different areas of social influence and leadership.
Dr. Justine, this is an amazing conversation. I'm really grateful for you and your
Thank
book,
you.
because I feel that your book opens a new door to so many things, and I think you're ahead of your time by at least 30 to 40 years. That means, Doctor, that people will be reading this book in 20 to 30 years, more than they will be reading it now.
Yes, I agree with you, because we see a lot of public speaking out there and increasing calls for charismatic leaders. And whenever we talk about leadership and social influence, we always look for those people who are good at chatter and speaking. And in most instances, these type of leaders have failed.
Chatter. I love, yeah, the chatter, right? Allow me to engage with you in more of a conversational tone, right? Because I'm really enjoying this. And I'm so grateful to the universe for allowing this to happen. There's so many things I want to ask you. We have to get a coffee after this. I don't think it's within the purview of the conversation, but I'm curious to know where you derive the concept, from what author or book or script you derive the concept of choiceless awareness. That's the number one question. There's a second question. Why did you choose those terms?
Thank you. Awareness. There is amazing power in awareness. If we tap into general awareness, that comes with that perceptual clarity. And awareness opens up a whole lot of doors to possibility. So if we enhance our awareness, we tend to partner with the voices of possibility.
Yes.
But the awareness need to be choiceless. Today, there's a lot. When I'm getting into a conversation with Roberto, I might have my own biases or prejudices. And I need to guard against and bracket those biases and prejudices and really listen. And listen without being judgmental or without putting my own preconceived notions ahead of the conversation. And this becomes choiceless awareness. And it's a concept that I borrow from Jiddu Krishnamurti, who's
Oh
a
my
famous
God.
author in
That's what I was going to ask
India.
you. I was
Yeah.
about to go there because that's why I asked you. That's why I chose to interview you. Because when I saw those words, I said, he got this from Jiddu Krishnamurti. And what that implies, it implies so much, because if you are trying to use that, because Jiddu Krishnamurti's talked so much about the generative aspect of listening, and it's very deeply spiritual, okay, extremely deeply spiritual. And I was like, how is he mixing, you know, bringing it into the organizational space would represent proposing a new paradigm of how to co-create solutions in the world.
Yes, I agree. If you follow Jiddu Krishnamurti and you follow Sadhguru in India, the spiritual element is quite fundamental. And I did write about workplace spirituality some time ago, and bringing these issues of listening into organizational literature. There is a bunch of scholars who are advocating for that, and it's quite fundamental. If we enhance our capacity to listen and really listen in organizations, we'll be able to co-create sustainable futures in any organization. So much of the dilemma, the challenges we see in organizations emanate from our failure of imagination, which failure of imagination comes through our failure to enhance our awareness. And how do we fail to enhance that awareness? It's as a result of our failure to partner with the many voices of awareness in whatever conversations that we have. So when we go into a meeting, in most instances, we are discussing sales targets. We just focus on sales targets, and we fail to partner with the many voices of awareness, the choiceless awareness, which comes with enhanced listening. Hence, the issue of conquering the listening dilemma in that respect.
So, and that, there's so many things I want to say, but I'm going to bite my tongue here. I'm going to ask you another question because there's so many things I want to say, but I don't want to focus. You know, I want to say the next question is, what is the listening dilemma? Could you please, you know, give some specific information of what the dilemma is?
Thank you. And we've called it the dilemma. Let me start from there. We've called it a dilemma because it's destructive. And in as much as if we fail to conquer this listening dilemma, there are a lot of negative consequences. And we have seen that the world over. A lot of the challenges we face today emanate from our failure to really listen and listen to the many voices of possibility awaiting to unfold. So the listening dilemma from a generic point of view is a failure to pay attention to those many voices of awareness, where we just focus on the verbal conclusions in a particular conversation. So if we are engaging in a conversation and you just pay attention to the verbal conclusion, then that's a dilemma, because we are not going to have that enhanced choiceless awareness. So it's a phenomenon that also involves a failure to absorb, internalize, and fully leverage on those many voices of awareness. So when we engage in a conversation and I only focus on the verbal conclusions, I'm likely not going to comprehend the conversation in total. We've done that in schools. We go to school, a teacher is teaching in front, we just focus on what he is saying, and we try to recite whatever he is saying. Come examination time, I write exactly what the teacher told me in class, and I marked down, Justine, you have failed. I focused more on the verbal conclusions and did not go deeper into that conversation, exploring and exploiting the many voices of awareness that comes from that conversation. So the listening dilemma also involves a failure to deal with the intervening screen of our thoughts. When you get into a conversation, you have a lot of things that are going around in your mind, the chattering minds. You are thinking of, I need to go and do my shopping after this interview. I need to go and watch football after this interview. I have to do X, Y, Z. All those intervening screens of our thoughts. If we fail to deal with that during a conversation, then it becomes a dilemma because it's so destructive. We end up just following a conversation without grasping to the bits and pieces of that conversation. So we have number one, a failure to pay attention to the many voices of awareness. We also have attentional loss or vigilance decrement. If we are going to have this conversation for the next 3 hours and we have people on the other side listening, when we started, they are following the conversation. But as we proceed with this conversation in hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, vigilance decrement starts chipping in and people start losing their focus. And then it becomes a dilemma because they will not grasp whatever conversation that we are having. And it also involves conditioned, conforming, and compulsive listening. If I say I am Justine, I come from Zimbabwe, and the way I think, the way I listen to whatever conversation is informed by my being Zimbabwean, it affects the entire conversation because I allow my being Zimbabwean to dominate the conversation. And
Yeah.
it avoids the issue of choiceless awareness or conforming to certain standards or being conditioned, being forced to follow certain standards in a conversation just because this is what Roberto wants me to say. And I have to just say what he wants. And I have to listen things in line with what he wants. It then becomes a dilemma. And it also involves, the last thing is lack of self-mastery, poor understanding of conversations, and a failure to scan the environment. If I lack self-mastery, I will not be able to listen effectively, and it becomes destructive. It becomes a dilemma. And as such, we need to conquer that listening dilemma and enhance our choiceless awareness for us to lead transformation. So in general terms, it's a failure to pay attention to the many voices of awareness waiting to unfold in any conversation. That's how I would put it there.
So many things you just mentioned. I mean, I'm sure we could spend hours unpacking this, right? Because I'd also like to ask you how much of this comes from the work of David Bohm and on dialogue. Did you reference any of David Bohm's material and his dialogues with Jiddu Krishnamurti on this?
Not specific, but I do talk a lot about dialogue and conversations, generative conversations. It's a conversation that we do every other time. Informed by the organization development work, there is dialogic organization development, which is a huge field pushed by Robert Marshak and Jivas Bush. So I'm involved in a lot of dialogic and generative conversations, hence the alignment that is there.
Of course. And well, I mean, I think the next part, if you'd like, well, what else could we talk about? I'd like you to, take the direction here, because I have a question about choiceless awareness and what it is, how you could, and how we could actually develop it, because it's tied into so many other things, and listening, right? Because you said, well, it also has to do with self-mastery. So listening through choiceless awareness is an action that could lead us to self-mastery? Or chicken or the egg, or is self-mastery necessary for that to be present?
I would say self-awareness is necessary for you to conquer the listening dilemma and then enhance your choiceless awareness. Because if I really master myself and I'm getting into a conversation, I know my emotional sets and I know my mindset with regard to this particular conversation, and I need to attend to that. Because I look at choiceless awareness as awareness that is not tethered to any form of beliefs, ideals, and conclusions. So it's an awareness that doesn't have any attachments to it. Why? Because I enter into a conversation with a clean mind, with a calm mind, and I listen to the conversation and I drew as much as possible from this particular conversation. So it's not tethered to any belief system or any conclusions that people might have. And one fundamental principle in choiceless awareness is having that calm, untethered, and passionate mind. And that comes with a lot of self-awareness and self-discovery. So self-awareness is one way that we can use to enhance our ability to conquer the listening dilemma and to facilitate choiceless awareness. And since we need awareness without effort, which you are referring here to as choiceless awareness, you are listening without effort. There's no strain with regards to you getting into a conversation. If you go into a noisy environment, you have to listen with effort because you're trying to manage the noise that is coming from around you and focus on this conversation. So it then limits choiceless awareness. So one way to deal with that, to enhance choiceless awareness, is to look at the environment in which the conversation is happening. A physical environment which is quiet and conducive for dialogue facilitates choiceless awareness. We also need to look at the physical state of the person listening. And I'll tell you a story here. Growing up, we used to wake up early in the morning when I was doing my primary school. Early in the morning, we have to help our parents with farming work. 2-3 hours we are in the fields farming. At 6 o'clock, we have to go to school. So we come from the fields, we run to school. We go to school, the first thing we have to do is some physical work at the school before we start classes. So technically, I've been working for the past 4 hours, and I have to sit in a classroom. The teacher walks up at 7, prepares nice breakfast, comes to the classroom, starts teaching. And they're always saying, Justine, pay attention. But Justine has been working for the past 4 hours. And now I have to be listening to this conversation. I have to pay attention in this class. So the physical state of the listener affects choiceless awareness. And some of the elements that are there include hunger. You can't get into a conversation with someone who is hungry. Of course, they are not going to listen and to really listen to whatever conversation that you are having. We have issues of tiredness and physical pain. If someone is on the hospital bed, they are not feeling well, we can't expect choiceless awareness from that particular state. So looking at the physical state becomes important. Looking at the environment in which we are having a conversation becomes important. And we also need to guard against our own biases, prejudices, jealousy, and boredom when we are getting into a conversation as a way to facilitate choiceless awareness.
So hence, incredible amounts of self-mastery and self-knowledge and self-awareness, right?
Yes,
because also comes the concept of the ego, right? And personality and agenda. And there's so much, so much literature, spiritual literature or not, about, even in psychology, about the whole function of the ego. The whole function of the ego, in a way, is to predict and operate in our environment, right? Which is to try to know the answers and solve problems. And it seems that choiceless awareness is the other side of the coin. It's the other polarity. not choosing to focus on a thing, but choosing to not focus on anything and everything at the same time.
Exactly.
So it's a paradox. So all our society has taught us to interact with the world from a mental space of ego and of presence and of speaking out and influencing. And I do understand, that's why I told you, this is extremely ahead of its time, because right now, most society, what it's selling to people is personal branding, public speaking, influence. And I coach a lot of leaders, and a lot of the things a lot of leaders want to do is influence. They want their agenda to be at the table. They want things to be done because of their specific agenda or the agenda of their teams. And what you're proposing is actually more creative and co-creative in nature instead of competitive.
Yeah. Yes, I like it when you use that term, the co-creative in nature, because I think we wrote in the book that listening is the foundation of love. It is the foundation of not only communication. When we're just having these generic abstract conversations, we look at listening as the foundation of communication. That's been said in a whole lot of conversations, but it's the foundation of love, of problem solving, critical thinking, and entrepreneurship, because of bracketing the self-centeredness, the ego issues that you're pointing out at, because you get into a conversation with that clean, calm mind that says, I need to engage in this conversation. And in one of the attributes, we mentioned vigor and vitality. That is, you're listening with optimism. I'm so eager to get into this conversation with Roberto. I am ready to get into this particular conversation. And as such, I have to engage as it is.
Today I've had to bite my tongue most of this conversation because I want you to speak, because you're the expert here on this topic. And I don't, because again, we could talk so much. I have so many questions and things to say. But aside from that, what's your vision for the future of organizations if they actually put this into practice?
Interesting. We are looking at organizations becoming collaborative networks, and a situation where organizations do break down a whole lot of hierarchical silos. And the ability to build collaborative networks demands enhanced states of listening, because we are placing everyone on the table for co-creation. It's no longer about a group of people who wear expensive suits and ties sitting in a boardroom and deciding for the entire organization. It's now about everybody, the janitors, the cleaners, and the drivers sitting at the decision-making table in a collaborative approach. So if we are to build collaborative networks, we need to give listening that pride of place and listen to every voice, because every voice matters in any conversation. But previously, only those who are referred to as executives used to see themselves as the ones who sit at the decision-making table, the ones who got to be listened, and everybody's voice is not important. So the shift towards more collaborative networks demands that we value listening and listening to everyone without projecting our own values, beliefs, and prejudices in any conversation. So when the so-called CEO is having a conversation with a janitor, they listen, and they really listen without projecting their CEO ego issues on that particular conversation. That's where I see it going.
Dr. Justine, what would you say to a person who would tell you that this is highly idealistic and never possible?
It is possible, because it is confirmed that when you listen, you enhance your creative impulse. And if you say listening does not help in creating that creative impulse, listening does not facilitate entrepreneurship, the question then is, what facilitates that? Because we are saying with listening, you partner with the voices of possibility. And what we need to be searching for is possibility. And we partner with that possibility if we listen to the many voices around us. I got to listen to Roberto. I got to listen to my kids at home. I've got to listen to my co-worker at the office. And when I listen to their many voices, the co-creation element brings sustainable results on the table. So listening, people value speaking. Speaking is overshadowing the listening element, but it's quite fundamental to integrated living and to the co-creation of sustainable futures. So it's not idealistic, I would say.
It's not idealistic, but then what would it take for organizations that have already been fundamented on the opposite of listening and co-creation, aka hierarchy, power, and silos? How can you get an organization like that and turn it around into an organization with completely different DNA?
Yeah, I would borrow from my colleague, Patrick Trottier, who emphasizes the need to help people reframe their own mindsets and emotional sets around what an organization is and how to lead organizations. If people like you who are involved in leadership coaching help people to reframe their mindsets and reframe their emotional sets around what an organization is and how to move organizations forward, we create a totally new environment with regards to organizations. And if we revisit our understanding of leadership and start seeing leadership as the ability to live, love, and work, it changes our approach to organizations, because loving and working, from where I stand, is quite fundamental to leadership. If you love your co-workers, you listen to them. If you love your team in an organization, you listen to them, you engage in candid conversations, and you tend to sit at the co-creation table as equals. If you are someone who works and who values working, it changes the way you relate with people in an organization. So for organizations to actually break down these hierarchical silos and move towards collaborative networks, there is need to help people, especially those who are referred to as leaders in these organizations, to reframe their mindsets and to reframe their emotional sets and to enhance their understanding of the 21st century environment and the demands of the 21st century environment with regards to organizations and organizing.
Now, obviously, this has a very this could be perceived for some people that have never experienced choiceless awareness or thought about it as something that's very in the air, something intangible. What would you tell to a CEO about how they could turn a change in perspective and mindset into profitability for an organization?
It's the realization and the understanding of the role of people in organizations. And CEOs need to understand that change involves a change in the mind, the head strength. We need to reframe our mindset and get that head strength. We need to look at the heart and generate the heart strength in terms of the emotions. There's a lot of talk about emotional intelligence everywhere. Everyone wants to present on that. And also the hands in terms of working. So if CEOs, senior leaders, comprehend the value that people bring to organizations, and that an organization to function, it requires people, and people who are nurtured to bring their best selves to work, definitely we get this the profit element. There's talk about the triple bottom line reporting requirement. It's important to appreciate that there's only one bottom line. Colleagues in the field where I come from attest to that. There's only one bottom line in business, and the bottom line is profit. And we need the other P's of that so-called triple bottom line to drive profits. And every CEO appreciates that. There's no CEO who doesn't appreciate the need for people and how people drives performance. But it comes back to the ego issues, the misdirected priorities about the CEOs, the board, pushing for profit at the expense of people and driving performance now at the expense of people. Every CEO, I don't think there's a CEO who doesn't know that people are important in organizations, but misplaced priorities and the need to satisfy board demands and other short-term gains in organizations lead us to ignore the people element and focus on the business element. Interestingly, the CEO roundtable redefined the purpose of the corporation, and quite a bunch of CEOs confirmed that the corporation exists to serve a bunch of stakeholders and not only the shareholders. So it's an awakening, and CEOs, senior leaders in organizations, coming back to the table to appreciate that people have value in organizations, and we need to tap into that value.
Dr. Justine, what would you say is the opposite of love?
Opposite of love is definitely hate.
And what is implicit in hate?
Implicit in hate is
Four-letter
a disregard.
word. Four-letter word starts with F. Fear, fear,
Yes.
fear, fear.
Uh-huh.
Right? That was a
Yes.
little directive. That was way directive. But what role do you think fear plays in misguided priorities at the top of organizations?
Fear, from where I stand, facilitate, I would say what I say, impression management in most people, where we have to put different faces just to impress a group of individuals. And we have seen that in most organizations. I fear my CEO, I act uncharacteristically taciturn just to impress this CEO. And what does that leads to is that it's draining to the person. And though it's fulfilling to the CEO, because most of these CEO, they feel so important when people fear them, and they misinterpret fear as respect.
Right.
So impression management is quite draining on the part of the subordinate in most instances, or the employees in that regard.
Right. So moving from organizations of fear and ego to organizations of love and co-creation.
That's quite fundamental. And Regina Huber, who is a colleague, wrote a lot about that with regards to co-creation, moving away from competition to co-creation and humanizing the workplace. It's something that is quite fundamental.
I'm going to invite that. You suggest that I should invite her to talk? I'd love to have a segue and invite her to talk about this here. I'll reach out to her on LinkedIn. Thank you. So I'd like to keep going, but this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Justine, for coming here and having this great conversation. I've had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
I do this more for exploring and then for, this is on social media and whatnot, but I just felt that we were having a cup of coffee online.
It's quite important. It's quite important. Thank you so much.
And just very quickly before we finish, I'm going to ask you a couple. This is a rapid fire round where you share some of, personal things so people can get to know you, right? And I'm just going to ask, they're a little superficial, but they're fun. Okay.
Yeah.
What is the number one characteristic about Dr. Justine that would ensure that people will enjoy his presence? What is the number one thing about you that makes you fun to be with?
I would say humility.
Okay.
Yes.
Number one, humility. Anything else?
Perseverance.
Perseverance and humility. Mm-hmm. And the next question is, could you share something with the audience that an interesting piece of information that very few people know about you?
Interesting thing that people don't know about me is the love and connection I have with my wife.
Wow.
Yeah, it's something that is dear to Dr. Justine. It's been 16 years, quite fundamental, and it led me to be here.
Any message you want to send your wife, and then ask her to see this at the end, so she receives the message?
I think this on its own, just seeing me on a show with Roberto is quite a motivator for her. She will have a good night's sleep today.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Because she sees this as progress in the journey of life that we are pursuing.
Well, I also want to send a message to my wife. I love you very much as well. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's something people don't know about me as well. So I share that, the love for my wife that I have.
It's quite fundamental. And, you know, it's something that is very rare in a lot of conversations. We rarely talk about this. And we are good at posting photos on our social media platforms. Some of us don't post such photos, though.
We don't. Yeah, we usually don't.
It's quite fundamental. Yeah.
Yeah. I prefer that privacy, but yeah, if it weren't for her, I wouldn't be here. Honestly, her support has been invaluable to my human development, for my soul development, essential. Yeah. So I'm very grateful to her. Dr. Justine, thank you so much. Let's continue the conversation. I'll have you on again, and you'll talk about some other interesting and amazing thing. And thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one. I'm gonna finish the transmission then, or I'm just gonna say a couple of words to you offline. All right. So wait on for a second.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.